Hi everyone. Today I want to talk a little bit about a little bit further about what Kundalini is. Um, there's some questions that came up, and I definitely don't have the answers to everything. I'm constantly learning, like everybody else. So I think we're kind of all trying to piece together. There's so many videos on the internet about Kundalini, but I've come to some conclusions on my own about what this energy is. And I think to sum it up, this isn't going to be like a huge lecture on Kundalini awakening or Kundalini energy, but I'm just kind of throwing some seeds out there to hopefully get some feedback on some of this stuff, to continue doing the research that I'm doing. But basically, Kundalini, for me, the way that I perceive it, is not the energy itself. We all have a tremendous amount of unconscious material that is sitting in potential, right? It's not kinetic, it's not moving. It's this potential energy within us, kind of kept locked away in the unconscious. And we can be activated by certain mechanisms or vehicles that then drive that energy forward, that convert it into kinetic energy. And so for me, the Kundalini itself, it's not the energy. We're not describing an energy. We're describing a vehicle that is used to bring this potential energy forward, to bring the unconscious forward. And Kundalini, just going with basic archetypes, right? We're talking about the snake, and the snake is very primal. So it's, it takes that potential energy, and how it brings it forward is in a primal way. Snakes shed their skin, so it's a platonic energy of death and rebirth that, it takes that potential energy, moves it through your system, and creates this death and rebirth process. And it's also very fast moving, right? And a lot of snakes are considered poisonous. So it has this element to it where it's dangerous, right? And we can see there's tons of Kundalini clinics for Kundalini syndrome, and all sorts of problems that can arise when people end up inadvertently using the vehicle, like driving a Viper. I drove a Viper once in Bellingham in the US, a very fast vehicle. And it's like, what car do you want to drive is the question when, to unlock this potential energy that we have within us. I think collectively we're in a place where we're not really choosing the vehicle so much. A lot of people aren't in practice with, how to move the chi in the body, how to move the ki in the body on a regular basis. It's just when this energy erupts, I think if we don't have a structure in place, the Viper, the Kundalini, the snake will move that energy for you. So it's about having a regular practice with, some, whether it's Tai Chi, Qigong, other forms of yoga that aren't Kundalini yoga. There's different practices that we can do, even dance, right? Certain types of dance can move the energy in our body and take that potential energy, that unconscious energy, and move it through our bodies in different ways other than the Kundalini way. So I think Kundalini, and again, I'm stepping out on the edge here to kind of bring forth some of my thoughts, but really I'm still studying this stuff. But I think Kundalini, the snake grabs hold of that energy like I said, when there's no structure in place to move the energy through your bioenergetic system. And a lot of the ways in which people wake up to their unconscious potential, their unconscious power, is through shock. And we live in a world where I think shock is a common occurrence, whether it's stuff we're seeing, out in society, on the news, within relationships. The world's in a state of imbalance, right? And so a lot of the ways in which when trauma occurs, or some sort of really hardcore cognitive dissonance occurs, that potential energy, that unconscious energy, can wake up, and it wakes up in a rather quickly. So it kind of vibrates and resonates when it's in shock at the frequency of the vehicle of Kundalini. And so I think that's why, and also the fact that in the 1950s, this vehicle was promoted in the West to use for waking up that unconscious material. And so we've had it sort of, mass media coming online and practices that are in the West, or that are in the East rather, being brought to the West. And so I feel like there's a lot of different ways we can manage that energy, but that has been promoted the most. And if you look at the practices of Kundalini yoga, they're kind of, they're in that intensity, right? It's again going into that shock element. They're very intense practices with the breath and movements. And so it promotes the energy to move rather quickly. What I understood when my potential unconscious energy woke up, I wasn't practicing Kundalini yoga, but it came in through shocking events. So there was a bunch of things, so it wasn't just the shocking events, but a bunch of things and events and methods that were in the realm of shock, what we could say is the frequency of shock. Any super intense methods of digging into the subconscious mind and all of that stuff we can consider shocking. And so that energy, that vehicle came online because I was engaging in exploration methods that were on the shocking side, as well as certain traumatic events. Because anyone who has experienced trauma will go through a similar process to that potential, that unconscious energy waking up, and then driving the vehicle of Kundalini through the nervous system. And a way to counterbalance that energy when it comes in, and the reason why I talk about this is because what I've learned is it moves through the parasympathetic nervous system. And although I say it goes up the spine, we're also talking about the vagus nerve, so it's going up the center column. And it's the reason why it moves up so quickly is usually because there's no resistance within the sympathetic nervous system to control its movement. So it just starts shooting up that vagus nerve, and there's no resistance. And the no resistance is the feminine principle. It's in receptive mode, it's allowing, it's surrendering, it's receiving. And so to balance that out, we bring in the masculine principle, which, is all about action and incorporating different ways of working with the energy that is not too feminine in nature, right? And allows a kind of resistance to the energy flowing through and moving up. So it's structured action, And then again, not too much. So if you're doing Tai Chi or Qigong or any of these practices, you don't want to be doing it too much when that unconscious potential energy is moving through you. You want to be everything in moderation, right? Especially when this energy is pumping through. And that's why bringing in the structure to the daily routines is so key, because the parasympathetic nervous system, when this energy is just running up that vagus nerve in the spine, it's going to affect your sleep, the circadian rhythm, what you eat, all of the basics. It's affecting that stuff. So bringing in the structure helps. I'm not saying that you're going to be able to have a really good sleep, right? You'll be able to go to bed because that energy is just shooting up, and it's kind of forcing you in a shocking way to confront your unconscious. And I'm not sure if once that the vehicle of Kundalini is kind of the method that's taken over that potential energy running up and running through your system, if you can really change it for another vehicle, like instead of a Dodge Viper, you choose to drive a Maserati or whatever, some pickup truck for more comfort, a Cadillac. I think that is really like within the minute details of the person's decisions when that energy starts pumping through, and what they choose to eat, how they choose to process through the information, I think can possibly transfer the vehicle to adopt another method, another vehicle to allow that energy to rise through. So I believe Kundalini itself is the vehicle with the less resistance, and so that's why it moves the quickest through your system. It moves with great force, and it moves to transform you like the snake, death and rebirth. It's going to force that whole transmutation really quickly, and because the poison is there, it'll push through blocks even when the system can't handle it. So anyone going through this potential energy waking up in them, and the unconscious and the cognitive dissonance and all of that, I would highly recommend reading up on different systems. That's how I managed to change the vehicle eventually, but I had to do a lot of research because I didn't have any structure in place. Before that, I was studying yoga, and I was studying therapeutic yoga, which is all about alignment. And it did have some of the formal teachings at the basis of, Vedic yoga, but it didn't have any of the Kundalini teachings. And it didn't really have any teachings like the 3-year course to describe how to manage the outcome, or how to manage the energy as it's moving out to produce the outcomes that you want, and to allow it to flow in a way that is not harsh on the system and healthy for the system. I'd also like to bring in here that, if you have a serpent in your Mayan astrology chart, it's highly likely that you have that energy building up in your system for a quick and speedy movement of the unconscious up through your system. And also, if you're into human design and gene keys, we can look at the gate of shock. And if you have the gate of shock in your system, in your human design system, or you have gene key 51, which moves from agitation, goes into initiative or initiation, and then into awakening, I believe that you're more likely to have this type, to drive this type of vehicle when you go through moments of that unconscious material, that sheer power of the unconscious, potential awakening within your life, within your bioenergetic system. So the key with the gate of shock and gene key 51 is really about, when you're in that agitation, it's about staying centered, right? When everything starts to awaken, staying centered, finding that center point within yourself, the eye of the storm, and then the initiative, which is the gift to transmute that energy, to have the awakening in a healthy and safe way, is to really allow. It's like when we have cognitive dissonance, right? We're in resistance to what the unconscious is bringing forward, what we're realizing on a bigger scale. And that resistance is what causes the suffering. So, moving with shock, we have to soften into the blow. The more rigid something is, the more likely it is to shatter. So there is, it's like you have to soften into it so that there's less opportunities for that energy to break anything as it's moving through. And the initiation also has to do with creativity. So the energy that's awakening, right, it is creative. It's primal, primordial, creative energy. And so when the agitation happens, in order to diffuse it, we have to use our creative capacity to take that energy, and then it's kind of like it will diffuse it and it will filter it out in a way where it's like a creative expression, right? If we don't, that's what they call shaman sickness, and all of this is like, you have to create with that energy as a way of dispersing the energy, of making it more malleable, right? To be able to work with it. And so that it doesn't shoot up that vagus nerve, hit the pineal gland, and then start projecting illusions out that are then projected onto the reality in which we're living, like our real life. So the creative element is extremely important because it gives us a way to channel that energy so that it doesn't get projected out as logic and what we think the world is in that moment. It's a bit complicated to explain, but basically, when you go through trauma, okay, if we talk about the gate of shock, if you go through any trauma, it puts the nervous system into a hyper state of arousal. And in the process, it really puts the amygdala at the back of the brain into this hyper state of vigilance. And the amygdala is a part of the brain that is used to detect danger in the world. So if we were picking berries, we learned that picking this type of berry could kill us. The brain, the amygdala, will then program itself to understand, do not pick that berry. So that berry will step out in the field. It will kind of like accentuate itself so that we can see it more quickly and more rapidly. And that's what helps us survive, right? So we know what to move towards, what to eat, and all of that. It's what has helped us survive, right, over all these millions of years. So when we have a traumatic event, a traumatic experience, a shocking event, right, the gate of shock, the Kundalini vehicle, that amygdala starts going into a hyperactive mode, and it gets confused. Trauma confuses it, especially with the shock element. And when we think we're perceiving things one way and then we realize that they're another way, because the unconscious material is bringing up so much information that is so different from what we perceive things to be, right? From the beliefs we had or what we believe to be true, it puts it into a hypervigilance, and then it's not giving us a clear signal in the field. It starts to bring forward elements that are safe, telling us that they're dangerous, right? It scrambles the messages. So we go into the state where we lose trust with ourselves, and then things kind of spiral down. So to go back to the method of transmuting this energy, the creative element is so important, because when that energy, the agitation happens, the initiative and the initiation is to be creative with the energy in the proper container, encadrement, French word, the proper container, to have an outlet to channel that, so that you can become the observer of what is coming forth deep from within the unconscious, without having to respond or react to it immediately. Because if you go into fight or flight with your environment, because of that shocking energy, and because the Kundalini was the vehicle of your unconscious material rising, it's going to just cause chaos in your field. So you need to be able to have that observer's view to see what it's bringing up, and not react to it immediately. So I think all of these are important factors, and I think that we can develop methods, we can develop vehicles to allow this energy to rise more gently from the unconscious. But right now, most of the people are having shocking type awakenings. But like I said, if you're practicing, I really like the traditional Chinese medicine and everything coming out of Asia and China, working with the energy on a regular basis, or even other methods of yoga are safe as well. It's like you create a different vehicle, right? So if you have these practices going on, when this unconscious material awakens, and it will on different levels for everybody, right? Everybody is going through, increased awareness with different things. Maybe not everyone, but, a large portion of the population. So it just allows that structure to be there, and for things to flow more seamlessly through that transformation, so that, it's not as harsh, and we're not dealing with, poisons and complete shedding of the physical body. There are softer ways, and definitely, setting an intention. If you feel like things are getting overwhelmed, like go take a cold shower. A cold shower works really well, and then keep on repeating and setting that intention for things to move slower. Ask the universe, right? Set that in your field as an intention. I'd like this energy to teach me just as much, but to move more slowly through my system, so that I can handle it, right? And really anchoring in that intention. But it's like an elastic, when you pull the elastic back, if there's too much within the unconscious that needs to come forward, because the person has been in avoidance or denial and resisting for too long, when it does pop, it's like a slingshot. So it's really hard to stop that. But I believe that some people can, right? There's if it comes in through trauma, Again, there's a little bit of a slingshot effect that takes place, but we're constantly, we have a certain amount of willpower. Like certain things, there's cause and effect, and once that, you know, there's the first layer that we might not be able to control, but then we can work with it as we move forward. So I just wanted to bring that forward because there were some questions about that. And I think, yes, depending on what's in your DNA, right? Who your ancestors were, what's in your blood and bones, like your physical constitution. There are different vehicles that fit different lineages better. So 100%, you know, working with the archetypes within your lineage, you know, what you feel resonates with you on a core level can help, you know, using those methods and practices of moving the energy through the body will be a safer route for you. But yeah, just the distinction between unconscious potential energy and the vehicles, I think, is what I wanted to bring forward today. The vehicles are not the energy itself. They are just the way in which that energy can unravel within any given system. So if you have any questions, you can contact me at inspiringplayfulevolution.com, and wishing you all a great day. Take care.